Edward Hanserd was born October 12, 1963 and raised on the east side of Detroit, Michigan. He grew up in the gang-ridden, impoverished, northeast Detroit neighborhood of Osborn. Before dropping out, he attended Osborn High School, which has been described as having the appearance of a prison. Ironically, Big Ed would ultimately only grow to 5 feet 6 inches. Hanserd made his first steps toward becoming a drug lord as a low-level marijuana dealer. While his marijuana business eventually provided him with a sizable income, he still hadn't attained the kind of success realized by two childhood associates, Maserati Rick Carter and Demetrius Holloway. In fact, Carter and Holloway and their best friend's drug network, who were higher up on the illegal drug food chain, were Hanserd's initial suppliers. Eventually, Hanserd's success and ambition led him to break away from the best friend's umbrella in order to establish himself independently of the by now preeminent drug organization on the east side of Detroit. Hanserd negotiated with notorious California crack kingpin Rick Ross for a steady supply of cocaine, which allowed him to step out from underneath the shadow of Carter's organization. Hanserd expanded his inventory to crack cocaine and marketed his personalized brand of the drug, which he named Tutti Frutti. In order to conceal the true source of his earnings, he purchased hair salons and cultivated a public image of a successful entrepreneur. One of these salons, located on Jefferson Avenue, a main Detroit thoroughfare, quickly became Hanserd's base of operations. At some point, Hanserd and Carter's relationship devolved into a professional and personal rivalry. There is some dispute as to the origin of the conflict between Hanserd and Carter. While some attribute the hostilities to a debt owed to Carter from Big Ed, others trace the bad blood to Hanserd's expansion into territory already held by Carter. Still, others ascribe the tension to Hanserd's eschewing of Carter as his exclusive supplier, in favor of an outside connection in California. Whatever the source may have been, the conflict initially manifested itself through rumored unflattering words. Big Ed is said to have claimed that his nickname was given to him by Carter's mother. In the summer of 1987, it progressed to a public argument in the unisex hair salon owned by Hanserd, and eventually led to shootouts and murder attempts between them both. As Hanserd's business grew, he inevitably found himself both competing with his former associates and racking up arrests. In 1987, Hanserd and a few of his employees were pulled over in downtown Los Angeles by officers who declined to make a formal arrest but determined that Hanserd was in possession of a new Mercedes 500 SE, Porsche, and Ferrari, not to mention several false identification cards. Within months, Hanserd was involved in a shootout with Carter back in Detroit. The exchange of automatic gunfire resulted in Hanserd being shot in the stomach and left to recuperate for months. When questioned by police, Hanserd refused to name his attackers, instead declaring that he'd handle it himself. In an effort to escape the danger and police pressure, Big Ed temporarily relocated to Yazoo City, Mississippi. In an attempt to maintain a low profile, he purchased a home in the name of his longtime girlfriend, Stephanie Jacobs. Ironically, in light of Hanserd's intention to go unnoticed, the frequent comings and goings of his associates had garnered unwarranted attention. It was reported that local residents described the home as a fortified compound. Big Ed's drug-running operation continued while he was away, and the Hanserd organization's profile rose dramatically, with law enforcement around this time. In February of 1988, Hanserd was detained by Louisiana State Police following a traffic stop where $198,000 in cash was seized. Another traffic stop in March resulted in the seizure of 31 kilos of cocaine from Hanserd associate, Nathaniel Wilson. In addition to the seizures, Hanserd was also arrested and charged with weapons violations on 3 separate occasions, as well as a few DUIs. During an arrest for a weapons violation, he was quoted as telling the arresting officers, "I am going to get Maserati Rick, and then I am going to get you." Ironically, Hanserd was soon arrested during yet another traffic stop while driving a Maserati. Officers seized $3,000 of Hanserd's cash. Nevertheless, Hanserd was eventually released and made his return to Detroit, where he resumed his war with Carter. In all, Carter is said to have made 3 attempts on Big Ed's life, but the hostilities were very much mutual. Big Ed reportedly participated in a shooting of Carter's mother's home, while she was standing on the front porch, holding Carter's 2-year-old son. 2 months later, Big Ed tried it again. This time, the shooting target was the mother of Carter's son. However, Big Ed got the address wrong and instead shot up the wrong house, belonging to the next-door neighbor of his intended victim. On September 10, 1988, a shootout ensued outside of one of Carter's car washes, when Hanserd and another man opened fire on him. Carter was left wounded in the stomach, similar to the one suffered by Hanserd in their first exchange of gunfire, and Hanserd and his associate were both shot in the arm. None of the participants spoke with police investigators. 2 days later, while Carter was being treated for the injuries he sustained in the shooting, one of Hanserd's enforcers, Lodrick Parker, entered his hospital room at Mount Carmel Mercy Hospital. When Parker left the room, Carter was dead from gunshots to the face. The 29-year-old was officially pronounced dead at 6:01 p.m. The assailant, Parker, was reputed to be the third man present during Carter and Hanserd's final confrontation. Hanserd himself had an airtight alibi, as he was in police custody for unlawful possession of a firearm during the time of the shooting. Hanserd denied any involvement in the shooting, and simply confessed to investigators that he'd once thrown a brick through the window of one of Carter's car washes. Carter's murder became the first time that there was a shooting inside the hospital in its 50-year history. The circumstances of his killing resulted in a permanent change in hospital policy throughout the city, and increased security measures and screening for visitors. In January of 1990, Hanserd was once again targeted in a traffic stop while driving a brand new Ford Bronco, which he'd purchased 2 days earlier. The stop netted police a seizure of $369,000 of Hanserd's cash. In March of that year, Hanserd was apprehended after a police chase that ended in a 4-car pileup that included Hanserd's BMW. He was again charged with weapons violations when a search of his car turned up a MAC-10 and an Israeli assault rifle. 2 years after Carter's murder, Hanserd was questioned in the kidnapping and disappearance of Carter's business partner, Demetrius Holloway. Eventually, it was revealed that Holloway had orchestrated his own public, but faked, kidnapping in an attempt to evade both his rivals and law enforcement. On October 8, 1990, Holloway was shot in the back of the head while shopping in his favorite store. As with Carter's murder 2 years earlier, the triggerman was Lodrick Parker, and again, Hanserd was in police custody at the time of Holloway's shooting. In late 1990, several of Hanserd's hair salons were firebombed. Hanserd was brought to trial when one of his associates, Anthony Medina, began cooperating with federal prosecutors during their investigation against him for drug trafficking. Hanserd and his attorney, Stephen Rabort, learned that his organization faced 24 counts related to drug trafficking when the federal indictment was unsealed on August 2, 1990. Prosecutors estimated that Hanserd trafficked upwards of 200 kilos of cocaine from 1984 to 1990 and generated $54 million annually in narcotic sales at his peak. According to law enforcement, he was shot 9 times on 3 separate occasions. In 1991, Hanserd pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to distribute cocaine and 2 counts of using a firearm in a drug trafficking offense. On May 9, 1991, he was sentenced to 30 years on the conspiracy count, and 5 years each on the firearms charges. Hanserd was transported to the medium-security federal prison in Pekin, Illinois, and later to Victorville, a medium-security federal prison in California. He has completed his sentence in a halfway house in Sacramento, California, and was released on November 11, 2016.